So I'm Bhavik Bakshi. I'm a professor of chemical and biomolecular engineering at Ohio State University, and I also co-direct the Center for Resilience over there. Basically, what I talked about today was about how important it is for us to take into account the role that nature plays in supporting human activities, and also how we can learn from nature and incorporate that in the decisions and the designs that we come up with. Basically, I talked about ways of analyzing systems in terms of the role that nature plays in supporting them, which related to an approach that we have developed, which is an ecologically based life cycle assessment. And I also talked about how we can design networks that involve a synergy between technological and ecological systems, and showed that with that approach we can do design that is within ecological constraints, number one. Number two, we can identify solutions that you may not be able to identify if you just focus on the traditional approach that looks at mainly technological options. So you can expand the design space and allow for greater innovation and creativity. I think I'd like to do things where I address on a problem that is important, and where I hopefully have the ability to make a difference and have an impact. And this area of sustainable development is probably the most important challenge that humanity is facing today. So I feel that as an engineer, I can bring in my engineering training, but also learn from other disciplines, and as a systems engineer, come up with proper, formal, rigorous ways, scientifically based ways to try and understand the many different challenges that we face: economic, ecological, societal, and so on. So I think the need for this kind of research is very much there. It's a very urgent area. There's a lot of interest also, certainly from the student body, but also from industry, government, and society at large. So it is nice to contribute, to satisfying those needs as best as I can. That's why I am doing this kind of research. So some of the key findings I actually already mentioned earlier. In terms of my research is basically, broadly speaking, it is very important to take a systems view of things. A lot of the challenges that we face with respect to sustainability uh, are because we don't look at the entire system that is of interest. So, for example, there is a tendency to come up with a technological solution that may solve one problem, but oftentimes it doesn't really solve the problem. It shifts it to another part of the supply chain. So, for example, if electric cars have zero emission, doesn't mean that they are environmentally benign or sustainable, because it depends on where the electricity comes from. So one has to take that larger systems view, and if you're interested in that, then you immediately start getting into multiple disciplines. Um, I already mentioned the finding with respect to accounting for ecosystems, but the other thing also is that I think from an educational point of view, it is very important for people to know about ecology and about how they depend on nature. And that knowledge is something that has been diminishing over the years. So that is also something, it's not really a finding, it's more of an insight from the research that we have been doing. I work with industry as well as with government in terms of helping them in developing products and designing systems that are more likely to be sustainable. So it involves things like evaluating uses for waste tires, things like designing heavy earth moving machinery, and also addressing a lot of fundamental questions that are out there. So in terms of policy implications, the work that we have been doing on biofuels has been looked at by the US EPA, and I hope it has influenced at least part of the renewable energy standard that they've come up with, because that work was funded by them, and we did it in collaboration with some of the people over there. Also, we have evaluated a lot of emerging technologies, things like green chemistry technologies, nanotechnology, and so on, and provided insight about the potential broader implications. So we hope that that also helps in improving the technology and in coming up with appropriate policy with respect to the sustainability of these technologies. With respect to human dimensions of global change, that can be a very big list. But some of the things that I've already mentioned is the importance of realizing, what nature does for us, and the fact that ultimately, if we focus on what nature does and we look at, what our human activities are doing to various ecosystem goods and services, that is something that is essential for making sure that the undesirable global change, at least, does not occur or is minimized, or we can at least adapt to it. This is a highly multidisciplinary issue, needs, engineers, geographers, economists, social scientists, lawyers. Everybody needs to be a part of this. And that is something that, is something that we haven't done very well necessarily in academia in particular, but that is a challenge that we face if we are to address, various human dimensions of global change. In terms of social science and policy questions with regards to the environment, I'm not a social scientist, I'm not a policy person either, but from my vantage point, more multidisciplinary, but more sort of from the engineering direction, I mentioned the fact that there is this increasing gap between knowledge about ecology and the way human activities depend on it and how they impact it. So that is one huge challenge, is how do we bridge that gap? With increasing prosperity, it has been shown that our ecological knowledge goes down. So how do we eliminate or reduce that negative correlation that exists between ecological knowledge and human advancement or economic prosperity? Some of the other things that I think are also very important is people. How do we get people to understand and realize what role nature is playing in their daily activities, and then how do we get them to actually take that information into account in terms of their decision making? This gets into all sorts of issues, including economic prices and things like that, but also in terms of culture and fashion and marketing of ecological goods and services, and those sorts of things. I had other policy questions that I had in the presentation, but these are some of the ones that come to mind right now.